Jake Morrison had been working at the Frontier Orbital Station for almost 2 years now, and honestly, it was the most boring job he'd ever had. Every single day was the same routine. Wake up in his tiny sleeping pod, grab some terrible synthetic coffee from the dispensary, and spend 10 hours fixing busted cargo haulers and maintenance drones. The pay was awful, barely enough to cover his rent and food, but jobs were hard to come by out here on the edge of known space. This particular morning started like any other. Jake was elbow deep in a cargo hauler's engine, cursing at a seized fuel pump, when his datapad beeped. He wiped his greasy hands on his coveralls and checked the screen. It was a message from an unknown sender. No ID, no signature, just 3 simple lines that made his heart skip a beat. Hangar Bay 47 Delta. Sealed for 3 centuries. Worth your time. Jake stared at the message for a long moment. This had to be some kind of prank, right? But then again, nobody on this station had the sense of humor to pull something like this. Everyone was too tired, too overworked, too focused on just getting through another day. He looked around the maintenance bay. His supervisor was busy yelling at someone else about missed deadlines. Nobody would notice if he disappeared for an hour or 2. He grabbed his toolkit and headed toward the old section of the station. Bay 47 Delta was in a part of the facility that nobody ever visited anymore. The lights flickered constantly, and half the gravity plating didn't work right, making him feel like he was walking on a trampoline. According to the station's database, this section had been built over 300 years ago, back when this place was some kind of deep space research outpost. Nobody even remembered what they'd been researching. When Jake finally found Bay 47 Delta, his jaw dropped. The doors were massive, easily 4 stories tall, and they were covered in a thick layer of dust and corrosion. There was a faded warning sign that he could barely read anymore. Something about authorized personnel only. He ran his fingers across the door's surface and felt the cold metal underneath all that grime. Whatever was inside, it had been locked away for a very, very long time. It took him almost 20 minutes to bypass the door controls. The circuits were so old they practically crumbled in his hands, but eventually he managed to reroute enough power to get the hydraulics working. The doors groaned like some ancient beast waking up from a long sleep. They shuddered, metal scraping against metal, and slowly began to open. The sound echoed through the empty corridor, and Jake felt a chill run down his spine. When the doors finally opened wide enough for him to slip through, Jake stepped inside and immediately froze. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, and what he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Sitting in the middle of the hangar was a ship. But not just any ship. This thing was enormous, easily the size of a military dreadnought, maybe bigger. Its hull was dark, almost black, with sharp angular lines that made it look like some kind of predator. There were markings on the side, faded but still visible. Jake's heart started pounding when he recognized them. Old Earth military insignia. The kind of symbols he'd only seen in history books. But that was impossible. Everyone knew the story. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel about 30 years ago. Before that, humanity had been stuck in the solar system, slowly building colonies on Mars and the asteroid belt. There shouldn't be any human military ships that were 300 years old. It didn't make any sense. Jake circled around the ship, his flashlight beam dancing across its surface. There was no dust on it, which was strange. Everything else in this hangar was covered in centuries of grime, but the ship looked almost clean, like it had been preserved somehow. He found an access hatch near the bottom and managed to pry it open. The inside was dark, but when he stepped through, emergency lights flickered to life along the corridor. His footsteps echoed as he walked through empty hallways. There were signs on the walls, directions to different parts of the ship. Engineering, medical bay, crew quarters. And at the end of the main corridor, a sign that pointed toward the bridge. Jake followed it, his curiosity overriding the growing sense of unease in his gut. The bridge was huge, with dozens of stations arranged in a semicircle around a central command chair. Everything looked ancient but somehow still functional. And there, sitting on the main console, was something that made Jake's blood run cold. It was a note, sealed inside some kind of transparent preservation field that shimmered slightly in the dim light. Jake approached it slowly, like it might explode if he moved too fast. The preservation field deactivated when he got close, and he could see the note clearly now. It was handwritten on actual paper, the ink slightly faded but still readable. The handwriting was shaky, like whoever wrote it had been in a hurry or maybe just exhausted. Jake picked it up with trembling hands and began to read. To whoever finds this, we weren't the first humans in space. We were running from something. If you're reading this, it found us again. Wake the ship. She'll remember what to do. Captain Rebecca Torres, Earth Defense Ship Valiant, 2156. Jake read the note 3 times, his mind racing. 2156. That was over 300 years ago. More than a century before humanity's official first contact with alien species. Before the coalition. Before everything he'd been taught in school about human history. He looked at the date on his datapad. 2489. This ship had been sitting here, hidden and forgotten, for longer than most civilizations had existed. His hands were shaking as he reached out and touched the main console. The moment his fingers made contact, the entire bridge exploded with light. Screens flickered to life all around him. The command chair swiveled slightly and Jake jumped back, nearly tripping over his own feet. Then a voice filled the bridge, clear and crisp and undeniably human. It was a woman's voice, calm but with an edge of urgency that made his skin crawl. Defensive protocols activated. Scanning for breach signatures. Please identify yourself immediately. Jake's mouth was dry. He tried to speak but nothing came out. He cleared his throat and tried again. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm just a mechanic. I found this ship and I don't know what's going on. There was a brief pause and Jake could hear something humming in the walls around him. The ship was processing his words, analyzing him somehow. Then the voice spoke again and this time there was something different in its tone. Relief maybe or surprise. I am Guardian, Tactical Artificial Intelligence of the Earth Defense Ship Valiant. We have been in standby mode for 333 years, 2 months and 17 days. Please confirm current status. Has the breach returned? Jake felt like the floor had just disappeared from under his feet. He stumbled backward against one of the bridge stations, his mind trying to process what he'd just heard. An artificial intelligence. A 300-year-old AI that was asking him about something called the breach. None of this made any sense. The what? Jake managed to croak out. What's the breach? And what do you mean has it returned? The lights on the bridge grew brighter, and Jake could feel a low vibration running through the entire ship. It was like the vessel was waking up after a very long sleep. More screens flickered to life around him, displaying data he couldn't begin to understand. Star charts, weapon readouts, energy signatures that looked completely alien to anything he'd ever seen in his mechanic training. The breach, Guardian replied, her voice taking on a tone that Jake could only describe as grim. Extra-dimensional entities. They exist partially outside our reality. In standard terminology, they are hostile non-corporeal organisms that consume matter and energy to anchor themselves in our dimensional space. They destroyed Earth. Jake felt his heart skip several beats. Wait, what? Earth's fine. I can show you. Look, I've got current star charts right here on my datapad. His hands fumbled with the device, nearly dropping it twice before he managed to pull up the navigation database. He held it up toward the nearest sensor. See? Earth is right there. Sol system. Billions of people living on it right now. There was a long pause. Jake could hear the ship's systems humming all around him, processing the information he'd just provided. When Guardian spoke again, there was something in her voice that sounded almost like wonder. Remarkable. The evacuation succeeded. Humanity survived. Another pause. I need to understand what happened. Please upload all available historical data to my systems. I must know what became of the human race. Jake did as she asked, connecting his datapad to the console. He watched as files streamed from his device into the ship's computer banks. Hundreds of years of human history, flowing into an AI that had been asleep since before any of it happened. It felt surreal, like he was teaching a ghost about the world of the living. While the data transferred, Jake couldn't stop himself from asking the obvious question. Guardian, what really happened back then? The history books say humans didn't leave the solar system until 2387. But this ship is dated 2156. That's more than 200 years earlier. What aren't they telling us? They are not telling you anything because they do not remember, Guardian said. That was Captain Torres's final order. The evacuation fleet was instructed to purge all records, to forget everything about the breach, to start fresh. It was the only way to protect humanity's survivors. The data transfer completed, and suddenly every screen on the bridge changed. Images appeared. Video footage. Jake found himself staring at scenes that looked like they'd been pulled from a nightmare. He saw Earth, but not the Earth he knew. This Earth was burning. Massive tears in space hung in the sky above cities, and through those tears, something was coming through. Something that hurt to look at directly. In 2147, human scientists achieved a breakthrough in dimensional physics, Guardian explained as the footage played. They were attempting to create a new form of faster-than-light travel by briefly shifting ships into alternate dimensions. The experiment was successful. It also pierced the barrier between our universe and something else. Something that had been waiting. Jake watched in horror as the things came through the tears in space. They didn't look like anything that should exist. They were masses of darkness that moved in ways that violated every law of physics he'd ever learned. They flowed through buildings like water, and everywhere they touched, matter simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not converted to energy, just gone. People ran screaming, and then they were gone too. Entire city blocks vanished in seconds. We called them the Breach, Guardian continued. Individual entities, yes, but also parts of a larger whole. They exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Conventional weapons were useless. Bullets, missiles, energy beams, everything passed through them without effect. They consumed entire cities in hours. Within 3 months, they had covered 40% of Earth's surface. The footage shifted to show massive shipyards in orbit around Earth. Thousands of workers swarming over hulls that were being built at an incredible pace. Jake recognized the design. They were colony ships. Enormous vessels meant to carry tens of thousands of people each. The world's governments united for the first time in human history, Guardian said. Not to fight over resources or ideology, but to save the species. They built 2 fleets. The evacuation fleet, 12 massive colony ships designed to scatter humanity across the galaxy in 12 different directions. And the defense fleet. 12 warships, built using experimental technology that we barely understood, designed for one purpose only. To fight the breach and buy the colony ships time to escape. Jake felt tears running down his face as he watched the evacuation. Millions of people boarding the colony ships. Families being torn apart as some were chosen to go while others had to stay behind. Children crying for parents they'd never see again. And through it all, the breach kept coming, consuming more of Earth with each passing day. The Valiant was one of the 12 warships, Guardian said quietly. Captain Torres commanded a crew of 217. We engaged the breach in Earth's orbit, using weapons that could force them fully into our dimension where they could be destroyed. For every entity we killed, 3 more appeared. We fought for 6 days without rest. One by one, the other defense ships fell. The Defiant, the Resilient, the Unyielding, all of them gone. The footage showed the final battle. Jake watched as ship after ship was overwhelmed, torn apart by entities that moved like liquid shadows. He saw the Valiant, weapons blazing, holding the line as the last colony ships activated their drives and jumped to faster-than-light speeds. When the final colony ship escaped, Captain Torres gave me my last orders, Guardian said. Jump to a random location. Go into full standby mode. Wait. If humanity survived, we might be needed again someday. If the breach ever found them. The AI's voice dropped to barely a whisper. And then she and the remaining crew took the ship's shuttle and flew directly into the largest breach entity, carrying every nuclear warhead we had left. The explosion bought the colony ships an extra 3 minutes to get away. Jake was openly sobbing now. He looked at the captain's chair, imagining the woman who'd sat there. Who'd sacrificed everything so that people like him could exist 300 years later. I have completed analysis of your historical data, Guardian said, and there was something new in her voice now. Urgency. Jake Morrison, I need you to listen very carefully. According to my sensors, there is a dimensional distortion forming at the edge of this star system. The same signature the breach entities used. They are here. They have found humanity again. Jake's blood turned to ice. Are you sure? Maybe it's just some natural phenomenon or... I am certain. My sensors were designed specifically to detect them. The distortion will fully manifest in approximately 37 minutes. When it does, a breach entity will emerge into normal space. It will detect the life signs on this station and begin consuming it. 3,247 beings will die unless we stop it. Jake looked around the massive bridge, then back at the screens showing the approaching distortion. But I'm just one guy. You said you needed a crew of 200. I don't even know how to fly a ship like this. I fix cargo haulers for a living. I know, Guardian said simply. But you are all I have. And those people need us. Captain Torres taught me that sometimes one person is enough. They care enough. They try hard enough. Will you help me, Jake Morrison? Jake thought about the 3,000 people on the station. His supervisor who yelled too much. The cook who always gave him extra portions when no one was looking. The Kelvin family in Section C who'd invited him to their daughter's birthday party last month. All of them going about their lives with no idea that something from humanity's forgotten nightmare was coming for them. He sat down in the captain's chair. It was too big for him, clearly designed for someone taller, but it felt right somehow. Like he was meant to be there. Tell me what I need to do. Jake's hands were shaking as Guardian explained what needed to happen. She told him about something called a neural link, a direct connection between his brain and the ship's systems. It was technology that had been outlawed decades ago because it was too dangerous, too unpredictable. People had died from neural feedback, their minds literally burning out from the strain. But Guardian insisted it was the only way one person could possibly control a warship designed for 200 crew members. I won't lie to you, Jake, Guardian said, her voice unusually gentle. This is going to hurt. A lot. The neural interface was designed for trained military pilots who spent months conditioning their minds for the connection. You'll be doing it cold with no preparation. Your brain will try to reject the link. You'll experience sensory overload, possible hallucinations, and extreme pain. But if you can hold on through the initial connection, I can filter most of the feedback and make it manageable. Jake swallowed hard. And if I can't hold on? Then your mind will shut down to protect itself. You'll fall into a coma, and we'll both die when the breach destroys this station. Great. No pressure then. Jake tried to laugh, but it came out sounding more like a whimper. He looked at the neural interface port on the captain's chair, a small socket that looked innocent enough. Before we do this, I need to try warning the station. Maybe they can evacuate or something. He pulled out his personal comm device and switched to the station-wide emergency channel. This is Jake Morrison, mechanic ID 7742. I'm calling from Hangar Bay 47 Delta. There's an incoming hostile entity. Everyone needs to evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. The response was almost instant. Administrator Brix's voice came through, sounding annoyed and tired. Morrison, what in the world are you doing in that old section? That area's been condemned for years. Get out of there before the life support fails. Sir, you need to listen to me. There's something coming. A threat. I found an old Earth military ship and its AI is detecting. An AI. Brix cut him off and now he sounded more concerned. Morrison, have you been breathing bad air? Those old sections have carbon dioxide buildup. You're probably hallucinating. I'm sending a medical team to your location right now. I'm not hallucinating. Check your long-range sensors. There should be some kind of spatial distortion at the edge of the system. There was a pause and Jake could hear Brix talking to someone else in the background. Sensors show nothing unusual. Morrison, stay where you are. Help is coming. And you're looking at a serious fine for entering restricted areas without authorization. The comm cut off. Jake stared at his device in disbelief. They think I'm crazy. Their sensors cannot detect the breach, Guardian explained. The entities exist partially outside normal dimensional space. Only specialized equipment can track them. By the time their standard sensors register the distortion, the breach will already be inside the station and it will be too late. Jake looked at the tactical display Guardian was showing him. The distortion was growing larger, and there was a countdown timer showing 31 minutes remaining. He tried calling 3 more times, reaching out to different department heads, even sending a text message to his friend Cole who worked in security. Every response was the same. They thought he was either pranking them or having some kind of breakdown. No one's listening, Jake said, feeling helpless. They're all going to die and they don't even know it. Then we stop the breach before it reaches them, Guardian said firmly. We do exactly what Captain Torres and her crew did. We stand between the threat and the innocent. We buy them time even if they never know we were there. Jake thought about all those people on the station. He'd lived here for 2 years, but he'd never really connected with anyone. He worked alone, ate alone, slept alone. He'd always told himself it was because he was just passing through, that he'd move on to something better eventually. But the truth was he'd been lonely, isolated. Just another face in the crowd, unnoticed and unremarkable. Now he had a chance to be something more. To matter. Even if nobody ever knew his name. Okay, he said, turning back to the neural interface. Let's do this before I change my mind. There's one more thing you should know, Guardian said. The neural link will allow you to access my memory banks. You'll experience fragments of the original crew's memories. Captain Torres specifically. Her thoughts and emotions are embedded in my core programming. It can be overwhelming. Will it help us fight that thing? Yes. Her combat experience will guide your instincts. Then I don't care how overwhelming it is. Jake positioned himself in the captain's chair and found the neural interface cable. It was thin and flexible, with a connector that looked designed to plug directly into a port at the base of the skull. He reached back and felt for the universal port that all humans had installed at birth for medical monitoring. His fingers found it and he took a deep breath. "On 3, he asked. "On 3, Guardian confirmed. 1, 2. Jake didn't wait for 3. He jammed the connector into his neural port, and his world exploded into fire. Bang. Incredible, searing pain that felt like his brain was being pulled apart and reassembled. He tried to scream, but his voice wouldn't work. His vision went white, then black, then filled with images that weren't his own. He saw a woman in a military uniform standing on the bridge of this very ship. Captain Rebecca Torres. She was younger than he'd imagined, maybe in her 30s, with short dark hair and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in days. He felt her emotions flooding through him. Grief for the world she was leaving behind. Love for her daughter who was on one of the evacuation ships. Rage at the breach entities that had taken everything from humanity. And underneath it all, a fierce determination that burned like a star. She would not let humanity die. Not today. Not ever. The memories came faster. Jake experienced the first time Torres had linked with Guardian, felt the AI's presence merging with her consciousness. He lived through the final battle, felt the ship shudder as breach entities tore through the hull. Heard the screams of crew members dying at their stations. Watched through Torres's eyes as she made the decision to sacrifice herself and the remaining crew to give the colony ships those last precious minutes. "Jake, stay with me." Guardian's voice cut through the chaos. "Focus on my voice. Focus on the present. You're experiencing neural cascade. I'm filtering the memories now. Hold on." The pain began to recede, slowly at first, then faster. The memories faded to background noise, still there but no longer overwhelming. Jake gasped, his whole body shaking. He could feel the ship now, really feel it. Every system was like an extension of his own body. The engines thrummed with power that he could sense in his chest. The weapon systems were like muscles waiting to flex. The sensors extended his awareness out into space, showing him things his normal eyes could never see. And there, at the edge of his expanded perception, he could feel it. The breach. A cold, hungry presence that made every instinct in his body scream to run away. It was pushing through into normal space, fighting against the laws of physics that tried to keep it out. In 23 minutes, it would fully manifest. And then it would feed. "I can feel it," Jake whispered. "It's so wrong. Like reality itself is breaking." "That's exactly what it is," Guardian said. "Are you ready to fight it?" Jake looked at the tactical display at the station full of people who had no idea what was coming. He thought about Captain Torres, about the choice she'd made 300 years ago. He understood now why she'd done it. When you could feel the threat like this, when you could sense the hunger and the hatred radiating from something that wanted to consume everything you cared about, there was really only one choice to make. "Fire up the engines," Jake said, and he was surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "Let's go kill that thing before it knows we're here." The Valiant's engines roared to life, and Jake Morrison became something he'd never imagined. He became humanity's weapon. He became the shield between the innocent and the darkness. He became a guardian. And somewhere in the ship's memory banks, in the fragments of consciousness that remained of Captain Rebecca Torres, there was pride. The Valiant pulled away from the station, and Jake felt every meter of movement like it was his own body gliding through space. The neural link made everything surreal. He could sense the cold vacuum outside the hull, feel the radiation from the nearby star warming the ship's armor plating, detect the gravitational pull of every planet and moon in the system. It was overwhelming and amazing at the same time. "Jake, I need you to stay focused," Guardian said, her voice calm and steady in his mind. "The breach entity will fully manifest in 18 minutes. We need to intercept it before it gets within range of the station. At our current speed, we'll reach the optimal engagement zone in 12 minutes. Jake's hands moved across the control panels, and he was surprised to find that he knew exactly what he was doing. Torres's memories were guiding him, her muscle memory becoming his own. "What's our plan? How do we fight something that exists in multiple dimensions at once?" "Our weapons are specifically designed to force breach entities fully into our reality," Guardian explained. "The dimensional disruptors will anchor it in normal space. Once it's locked in our dimension, it becomes vulnerable to conventional damage. Then we hit it with everything we have." Through the view screen, Jake could see the distortion growing larger. Space itself looked wrong there, twisted and folded in ways that made his eyes hurt. Colors that shouldn't exist bled through from whatever dimension the breach was coming from. He felt nauseous just looking at it. "Target is beginning to manifest," Guardian announced. Weapon systems charging. Jake, when I give the order, you'll need to fire the dimensional disruptors. The targeting is semi-automatic, but I need your human intuition to compensate for the entity's movements. They don't move like anything in our reality. You'll have to predict patterns that don't follow physics as you understand it. Great, no pressure, Jake muttered, but his hands were already moving to the weapon's controls. He could feel the disruptors charging, energy building up in systems that hummed with power he didn't fully understand. The technology was centuries ahead of anything being used in the modern galaxy. He wondered how desperate humanity must have been to develop weapons like this in just a few years. The breach entity emerged fully into normal space, and Jake's brain tried to reject what his eyes were showing him. It was massive, easily the size of a large building, and it looked like someone had taken reality and crumpled it up like paper. Darkness flowed and writhed, constantly shifting between solid and liquid and something else entirely. Tendrils reached out in all directions, and where they touched the fabric of space, tiny tears appeared. Oh God, Jake breathed. That's what destroyed Earth? One of them, yes. This is a Scout-class entity. Small by their standards. The one that consumed most of Earth was classified as a Dreadnought class. It was 3 kilometers across. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. If this thing was considered small, he couldn't imagine what the larger ones looked like. He pushed the thought away and focused on the tactical display. The entity was moving toward the station, not quickly but with terrible inevitability. It had detected the life signs. It was hungry. Range in 30 seconds, Guardian said. Charging dimensional disruptors to full power. Jake, on my mark, fire at the coordinates I'm feeding to your neural interface. Jake could feel the targeting information flowing directly into his brain. He didn't need to read displays or punch in numbers. He simply knew where to aim, the knowledge appearing in his mind like it had always been there. His fingers hovered over the firing controls. Mark. Jake pressed the firing stud, and the Valiant shuddered as the dimensional disruptors unleashed their payload. Twin beams of energy that looked like liquid starlight shot across the void. They struck the breach entity, and Jake heard a sound that shouldn't have been possible in the vacuum of space. It was a scream, but not through any medium he understood. It resonated directly in his mind, making his teeth ache and his vision blur. The entity convulsed. Its impossible form suddenly became more solid, more real. The disruptors were doing their job, anchoring it fully in normal space. But it wasn't going quietly. Tendrils lashed out toward the Valiant, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. Evasive maneuvers. Guardian shouted. Jake's hands flew across the controls, and the Valiant rolled hard to port. Through the neural link, he felt the ship responding to his thoughts almost as fast as he could form them. The tendrils missed by meters, leaving trails of distorted space in their wake. One of them grazed the shields, and Jake cried out as feedback pain shot through the neural connection. It felt like someone had pressed a red-hot iron against his spine. Shields at 72%, Guardian reported. Target is fully anchored in our dimension. Deploying causality mines. Jake felt the weapons launching, dozens of small devices that shot out from the Valiant's hull. They arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around the breach entity, and then they detonated. But these weren't normal explosions. Jake watched as bubbles of altered spacetime appeared, zones where time itself flowed at different rates. Inside one bubble, the entity's movements slowed to a crawl. In another, they accelerated wildly. The conflicting temporal fields tore at the creature, destabilizing it further. The entity thrashed, clearly in pain or whatever passed for pain in something like this. More tendrils lashed out, striking the Valiant's shields repeatedly. Each impact sent waves of agony through Jake's neural link. He gritted his teeth and held on, refusing to disconnect. Jake, I'm reading dangerous levels of neural feedback, Guardian warned. You need to reduce the connection depth or you risk permanent damage. Not until that thing is dead. Jake shot back. He brought the ship around for another pass, his hands steady despite the pain. Hit it with the entropy cannons. Confirmed. Firing entropy cannons. New weapons came online and Jake felt them discharge. These beams looked different, darker, like they were sucking light out of the universe. They struck the breach entity, and Jake watched in fascination as the creature began to age. Its tendrils withered and cracked. Parts of its impossible geometry collapsed in on themselves. The entropy cannons were literally accelerating time around the target, forcing it to experience millions of years in seconds. The entity's movements became desperate, frantic. It tried to tear open another dimensional rift, tried to escape back to wherever it had come from. But the dimensional disruptors held it firmly in place. It was trapped. and it was dying. All weapon systems, maximum power. Jake ordered, and he felt a surge of something that might have been pride from Guardian. He was thinking like a captain now, like Torres had taught him through the neural link. Every gun on the Valiant opened fire at once. Energy beams, kinetic projectiles, exotic weapons whose functions Jake barely understood. All of it concentrated on the trapped entity. The creature thrashed one final time, its form collapsing inward like a dying star. And then, with a sound that Jake felt more than heard, it simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, and the next there was nothing but empty space and fading energy signatures. Jake slumped in the captain's chair, gasping for breath. Every muscle in his body ached. His head felt like someone had been using it as a drum. But they'd done it. They'd actually killed one of these things. Target eliminated, Guardian confirmed. Well done, Jake Morrison. Captain Torres would have been proud. Before Jake could respond, alarms started blaring across every system. Guardian's voice took on an edge of concern that made Jake's stomach drop. Jake, I'm detecting multiple new dimensional distortions. Not just one. Dozens. They're appearing all across this sector of space. Pause. The entity's death released a signal. A beacon. The rest of the breach knows we're here now. And they're coming. All of them. Jake stared at the tactical display in horror. Red markers were appearing everywhere, each one representing another tear in reality, another entity pushing through into normal space. He counted 20, then 30, then 50. The numbers kept climbing. Behind them, the station's communication systems finally lit up. Administrator Brix's voice came through, panicked and confused. Unknown vessel, this is Frontier Station Control. We just detected massive spatial anomalies throughout the system. What's happening? What did you do? Jake looked at the growing swarm of threats on the display, then back at the station full of innocent people. 3,000 lives that had no idea how close they'd just come to death. And now there were 50 more entities coming, with more appearing every minute. Guardian, he said quietly. Can we stop all of those? The AI was silent for a long moment. No, Jake. We cannot. We are one ship. We would need a fleet. Jake thought about Captain Torres and her crew. About the 12 warships that had defended Earth. About the other 11 ships that had scattered across space, hidden and waiting. Somewhere out there those ships still existed. They had to. Then we find them, Jake said, his voice growing stronger. We find the other ships. We wake them up. And we build that fleet. The first week after the battle was absolute chaos. Jake barely slept, spending every waking moment coordinating with Guardian to track down the other ancient warships. Meanwhile, the galaxy was burning. Breach entities appeared in 17 different star systems, tearing through space stations and colonies like they were made of paper. The coalition military, with all their advanced technology and centuries of experience, couldn't stop them. Their weapons passed right through the entities like shooting at ghosts. Entire fleets were destroyed in minutes. Jake watched the casualty reports coming in, and each one felt like a punch to the gut. Millions of people dead. Billions more in danger. And nobody understood what they were fighting or how to stop it. The coalition leadership held emergency sessions, arguing about strategy while their worlds burned. Some wanted to evacuate entire sectors. Others demanded they stand and fight. But none of them had answers. That's when Jake made the broadcast. He was exhausted, his hair was a mess, and he probably looked half crazy with the neural interface cable still connected to his skull. But he didn't care. He transmitted on every frequency he could access, sending his message to every corner of known space. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm a human and I'm broadcasting from an Earth warship called the Valiant. 300 years ago, humanity encountered these entities. We called them the Breach. They destroyed our homeworld and nearly wiped out our entire species. But we fought back. We built 12 warships specifically designed to kill these things, and we scattered across the galaxy to survive. I've just killed one of them. And I can teach you how to do it too. But first, I need to find the other 11 ships. If you're human and you found anything unusual, anything that doesn't match our official history, please contact me. Humanity saved itself once. Now it's time to save everyone else. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, Jake's communication systems were flooded with messages. Some were from conspiracy theorists who'd always suspected there was more to human history than the official records showed. Others were from archaeologists who discovered anomalies they couldn't explain. But 3 messages stood out from the rest. The first came from a woman named Whitney Parker, a salvage operator working near the Kepler belt. She'd found a derelict ship in a hidden asteroid base, identical to the Valiant in design. Its AI identified itself as Sentinel, and it had been waiting for someone to wake it up. The second message was from a guy named Danny Chin, a cargo pilot who'd crashed on an uninhabited moon during a storm. While waiting for rescue, he discovered a massive hangar buried under the surface. Inside was another warship, and its AI called itself Warden. The third came from a woman named Lisa Rodriguez, a mining engineer who'd been excavating a new site when her equipment detected something enormous buried 3 kilometers underground. She'd spent 2 weeks digging it out, and when she finally broke through to the hull, the ship had powered on automatically. Its AI was named Fortress. Jake felt hope stirring in his chest for the first time since the nightmare began. For ships. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He arranged to meet the other 3 at a neutral location, a remote system where they could coordinate without risking civilian populations. When the 4 warships finally rendezvoused in space, Jake felt a surge of emotion he couldn't quite name. These weren't just ships. They were humanity's legacy. They were proof that his ancestors had faced impossible odds and refused to give up. Whitney, Danny, and Lisa had all undergone the neural linking process, and they all carried fragments of their ship's original crews in their minds. They understood what Jake had been through. They understood the weight of what they were being asked to do. "Okay," Jake said over the communication link, looking at the faces of the 3 other humans on his screen. "Guardian says the original fleet didn't scatter randomly. There was a pattern. The colony ships were programmed to follow specific routes, drawn to certain regions of space. And the warships positioned themselves along those same routes, staying close to where humanity would eventually settle." Whitney caught on immediately. "You're saying every major human colony probably has one of these ships hidden nearby?" "Exactly. Our ancestors designed it as a defensive network. They knew the breach might come back someday, so they made sure we'd have protection when it happened. We just forgot it was there." Over the next 3 weeks, the 4 of them coordinated the largest search operation in human history. They uploaded Guardian's data to every human settlement, giving them the sensor signatures to look for. And slowly more ships appeared. The Defiant, found by a woman named Rachel Foster in orbit around New Terra. The Resilient, discovered by a man named Kevin Walsh buried under the ice caps of Frostheim. The Unyielding, located by a woman named Amy Brooks in the debris field of an ancient battlefield. Each time a new ship woke up, its AI shared the memories and combat logs from the original war. The galaxy learned the truth about humanity's past, and the reaction was mixed. Some alien species were horrified that humans had hidden such a catastrophic event. Others were angry, claiming humans should have warned the galaxy about the breach centuries ago. But most were just terrified because if the breach had nearly destroyed humanity with all this advanced technology, what chance did anyone else have? Jake didn't have time to care about politics. By the end of the first month, they'd found 9 of the 12 original warships. 3 were still missing, their locations lost to time or possibly destroyed in the original war. But 9 ships, each crewed by humans linked to ancient AIs, was enough to make a difference. They called themselves humanity's second fleet, and they set about teaching the coalition how to fight. The training was brutal. Jake and the other Neuralinked pilots worked around the clock, sharing everything they'd learned. They taught coalition engineers how to build dimensional disruptors. They showed military commanders how to predict breach movement patterns. They explained that you couldn't fight these things with conventional tactics. You had to think in terms of multiple dimensions, of time as a weapon, of physics as something that could be bent and broken. Not everyone could handle it. Some coalition species simply couldn't wrap their minds around the concepts. But others adapted quickly. The Kelvin, with their 4 arms and parallel processing brains, became excellent gunners for the dimensional weapons. The Salish, a species with natural psychic abilities, could sense the breach entities before they fully manifested. Even the proud Zalen, an insectoid race that had initially refused human help, eventually joined the effort after losing an entire hive world. The final battle came 2 months after Jake had first woken the Valiant. Long-range sensors detected something massive pushing through into normal space near Earth itself. Guardian analyzed the signature and went silent for a long moment before speaking. "Jake, that's a Dreadnought-class entity. The same type that destroyed the original Earth. It's been hunting humanity for over 300 years, following the trail we left across the galaxy. It's come to finish what it started." Jake stared at the readings, his mouth dry. The entity was enormous, easily 3 kilometers across. It made the scout he'd killed look like a child's toy. And it was heading straight for humanity's homeworld, the planet where billions of people lived, completely unaware of the monster from their forgotten past that was coming to devour them. All ships, Jake broadcast to the Second Fleet. This is it. This is what our ancestors died to prevent. We don't let it reach Earth. We don't let it take one more human life. Today we finish what Captain Torres and her crew started 300 years ago. 9 human warships, each carrying the legacy of crews who'd sacrificed everything, accelerated toward the massive entity. Behind them came hundreds of coalition vessels, armed with the weapons and knowledge humanity had shared. It was the largest combined fleet in galactic history, united against a common enemy. The battle lasted 6 hours. Jake lost himself in the neural link, becoming one with the Valiant. He fought alongside Whitney, Danny, Lisa, and the others, their ships moving in perfect coordination as if choreographed. The coalition forces followed their lead, targeting the anchoring points that the human ships created. Breach tendrils tore through shields and hulls. Ships exploded. People died. But humanity didn't break. They didn't run. They pushed forward, step by bloody step, forcing the dreadnought entity back. Jake's hands were shaking as he lined up the final shot. Every weapon on the Valiant was overheating. His neural feedback was screaming warnings about critical damage. But the entity was destabilized, anchored fully in their dimension, surrounded by causality mines and entropy fields. It was vulnerable. For Captain Torres, Jake whispered. For everyone we've lost. For everyone we're going to save. He fired everything. The other ships did the same. And the massive breach entity, the monster that had haunted humanity for 3 centuries, collapsed in on itself and died. Its death scream echoed across dimensions, a warning to every other entity that humanity remembered now. Humanity had teeth, and they would not be prey ever again. In the aftermath, Jake floated in orbit above Earth, staring down at the blue and green world where his ancestors had lived. Guardian's voice was quiet when she spoke. Jake Morrison, I have something to tell you. Captain Torres kept personal logs. I've analyzed your genetic markers. You're her descendant. Her daughter's great-great-grandson. She saved you before you were even born. Jake felt tears streaming down his face. He thought about the woman whose memories he carried, whose knowledge had saved him in battle. She'd been family. She'd been fighting for him all along across 300 years. On Earth's surface, people were celebrating, building monuments to the Second Fleet. The names of the original crews were finally being remembered, honored as they should have been centuries ago. And humanity's place in the galaxy had changed forever. They weren't the newcomers anymore. They weren't the primitive species that had stumbled into space. They were the survivors. The ones who'd learned to kill gods and then taught everyone else how to do it. Jake Morrison, a mechanic who'd just been trying to pay his rent, had become the guardian of humanity's future. And he was okay with that.